Osmo Action 5, DJI's first pro action camera. I've had this camera for just over a month now, and I've been putting it to the test in all sorts of outdoor activities, freediving to paddleboarding to kayaking, on a boat, mountain biking. We'll go through the specs, but I'll also tell you what I've learned from using this camera, and you can make up your own mind if this is the action camera for you. Let's get into it. The Action 5 features a pro level sensor, 13.5 stops of dynamic range, excellent for post-production, but also a new generation 1/1.3 inch sensor, meaning excellent low light performance, and you can really get the detail in this camera. For people like me who use cameras like this often near sunset, game changer. It's got a 4 nanometer chipset built in, so a pro level chipset, excellent for subject centering, tracking, but most of all, battery performance. There's one outstanding feature on this new camera that makes it pro camera for somebody like me who spends a lot of time in the water. It's got a built-in pressure sensor. When you go in the water, you can automatically start recording, you can stop recording, but not just that, it records the depth and you can overlay it on the screen in feet or meters, and it is super accurate. There is something you need to bear in mind when using this, which I'll go through later on when we go through the freediving footage. Before we go on, this footage right here is filmed with the Action 5 Pro, just to give you a bit of an idea of what their vlogging capabilities are. I use an action cam for everything. It's not just action. I'm using the DJI Mic 2, by the way, for a wireless connection. That is the audio right now. You could say goodbye to battery anxiety with action cameras. We've all been there, bringing multiple batteries with us wherever we go. With this camera, you can get up to 4 hours on one battery. Most cameras on the market can only do up to 2. I've been filming with this camera on a single battery on 4K on 2 freediving adventures, 1 kayak adventure, and using the paddleboard, and we are only at 28%. They do what they say they can do. So these new 1950 milliamp hour batteries, they're the same form factor as the other batteries on the DJI 4, and they actually fit in the triple charger as well. It must be aided by this new pro level chip for optimized sort of battery algorithm performance as well. But the battery on these things is lasting forever. Comes with 47 gigabytes of internal storage. You can, of course, as well use a micro SD card, but it's a bit of a game changer for someone like me who regularly forgets SD cards. There's dual OLED screens, front and rear, which I've found to be very bright and really good with wet finger operation. The bezels have been reduced on the Action 5 in comparison to the Action 4, which you can see here. The screen is obviously bigger, brighter, at the same form factor, and they're also weighed both cameras. The Action 5 is 146 grams and the Action 4 is 148 grams, so it's just a bit lighter as well. I'm really liking DJI's ecosystem at the moment. I fly DJI drones, so all my aerial footage is DJI. It's super easy to match the color space, but not just that. On this camera, the screens are super easy to navigate. The displays, as I've said, are really bright. You can change the resolutions, even with wet fingers. Reviewing footage is really easy, but one of the things I really like, which they've invested in, is the Mimo app. You can now download footage and it's super rapid. Wi-Fi 6 and USB 3, unbelievably quick. 80 megabytes a second versus the previous generation, which was 30 megabytes a second. You can switch around, so if you get a message on your phone, you can just leave it running in the background and it will still download. I've not known that before on any software, certainly like the GoPro Quick app or the previous Mimo app of the 4, you had to stay on the screen. The temperature sensor, which is built into the camera, it's actually hidden really coolly in the Action logo at the front. That really helps coming from underwater to on the water surface, adjusting to the sky, etc., and then readjusting back to the underwater. The magnetic mounting system for me is the best in the game. Others have tried to copy it, but this is by far the best. In the past, I've definitely not taken the shots I should have using the thumb mount screws, just because it was an epic changing them. These are super quick. On the kayak primarily, I switch between vertical and horizontal format in seconds. So I used this camera on a recent wild camp. Obviously I couldn't say what camera it was at the time because they're not released. The low light performance seems to be really good. I think the ISO range is massive in this camera. I'll put it on the screen because I can't quite remember what it is. Nighttime stabilization on this camera seems to work very well. The footage you're about to see is in full automatic settings. There's no color grading, straight out the camera, because that will give you the truest idea of what the footage is like. I better get off my Land Rover now and let's get to the footage. We start the freediving test off with some 4K super slow-mo, real nice and crisp. I don't use a dive case for this footage. The dive case will impact the depth gauge if you want to use the overlay like I have here. By the way, if you want to use the overlay, do it in the Mimo app afterwards. It's super simple. However, if you're using the dive case, bear in mind that the depth pressure gauge doesn't work so well.
To be expected really, but here showing me 0.5 metre when I'm actually 7 metres retrieving an anchor. The front and rear screens give you a real live update of the depth, which is handy for when you're filming, and I did check it against my dive watch and it worked really well. The details there with the tiny fish, some lovely colours here coming out of that jellyfish. That's 4K 60 half speed, colour sensor working there, super crisp. Picks up plenty of detail. There's loads of overlays you can add on, from G-force to incline angle to a timer. You can do it all in app afterwards. Pretty easy to do actually. That's 4K 60 slowed down to half speed. When we broke the jetpack out, I used the mouth mount primarily just to get that ultra wide 155 angle shot, but it was getting on a bit during the day, so it was testing the low light performance a little bit. More than usual. I was quite happy with that, considering the visibility actually. The camera makes it look better than it was, if I'm being honest. Super easy to use, really quite trustworthy without the case. I was flipping between mounts with a magnetic mount, which worked well. Just bear in mind, if you are using this camera in the water, make sure you haven't got any red visible. Away from the sea and into the forest now for a bike test. In the woods, most of the footage you'll see is from this mount here on the front of the helmet. The ultra wide angle. Now, I really want to test the stabilization in here because it was quite challenging light. It's a lot darker than it looks in the footage, but it was changing, quite a lot of shadows, and I feel like the Rocksteady Plus and 4K 60 has done a solid job. That's just played back at normal speed, by the way, but I'm quite happy with that footage. Now, the telemetry that I added on here is just altitude and G-force. I'm sure there's other things, and I've removed the selfie stick here on the right hand side. I feel like it looks pretty good as well. Another thing to note, the ecosystem, I was just playing back the footage while I was in the forest. Slick. Boat test, about an hour of daylight left when I took the boat out here. All the footage you can see is filmed on the Action 5, excluding drone footage. Good stabilization test as well, so we got rocked around quite a lot. Nice half-speed shot of the propeller. So you can remove the selfie stick in post-production. It's called InvisiStick enabled. It doesn't take long, but it's done a cracking job. I find myself taking my 360 camera out less. Into the sunlight, I do film a lot at this time, and as you can see, the shadows, the contrasts, the dynamic range, the colours, all looking great, and there's no post-production modifications or colour grading or anything going on here. Shot fully in auto. So it was a bit choppy at times. Good test for the boat. I actually pulled 1G on this shot. I just haven't put the overlay on, but I feel the stabilization does a cracking job. You can see here in the handheld shot, that's what it looks like when you're holding the camera, and that's basically what it looks like in post-production. Side by side there, I think you'll agree it does a good job. Most action cameras do these days, if I'm honest. So I did throw the anchor and have a little bit of a dive, just to test a few things. It's got 10-bit D-Log as well, so if you're into colour grading, you've got all that to play with. The reason I'm showing the dive footage here is because with it being so close to sunset, it was quite challenging conditions, but the camera picks up the underwater scenes pretty well, I will say, considering there wasn't that much light to play with. But I did use the dive case on this shot, so that's why the depth gauge wasn't working so well, as we've shown in the freediving footage. The lens droplet test, lifting out and in the water, there's no droplets to be seen. It looks crisp. It almost looks like I'm using one of those dome mounts. Really good. It's just me in mouth mount climbing back onto the boat. All good. The kayak test. This was a good one because it was a grey murky day. Only had about 30 minutes of daylight left, and it was good for testing out the contrasts and just how the camera performed in not great light, to be honest. It rained a little bit as well. Yeah, just the magnetic click lock. I do really trust that now. It's super good. Looking back at myself there, 4K 30 normal speed. As you can see, 4K 30 normal speed again. Now the ecosystem, the front screens, etc. really easy to use even when wet. I wanted to test that out with the kayak. Now for another paddle now, this is 4K 60 half speed. This looks really slick. I do really like this. It's always a good shot. The 155-degree wide angle is really good for fishing, by the way. And then switching from horizontal to vertical for those slick little 4K 60 Instagram reels. Big fan of that. As you can see, it's dark and the camera shows everything to be a lot lighter than it is, so bear that one in mind when you're using it. Really happy with that footage. Paddleboard test. I'm not the best paddleboarder, but yeah, quick front mount there. No waterproof case, didn't really require it. It was really cloudy, but when the sun came through them clouds, it blew everything up. The camera did handle it really well. There's a 155-degree wide angle point of view. That's the mouth mount, by the way. As you can see, I've kept the selfie stick in on this shot. Sometimes I like to just keep it in, sometimes I'll remove it in post. If I stand up on a paddleboard, I normally fall back in within minutes. 4K, 120, there's me going in. Losing the hat, but somehow keeping the sunglasses. Cycling sunglasses too, not made for the job. But there we go, picking up all the shadows there nicely. Quick paddleboard overview. So it's super windy here today. This is the audio from the DJI mic. I'm just going to turn it off. Now this is the native audio on the camera. It is windy. Is it picking up any wind noise? Audio test straight out of the camera, no wireless microphone. Let's see what it is. You're right next to the engine as well. Getting any wind noise? Send it! Hyperlapse and time lapse, not as common these days. I think they got done to death on YouTube, but anyway, if you're into it, it does a decent job here. This one here was taken over a 1 hour period and it only used 12% battery, and here's a quick hyperlapse finishing on a very famous race circuit. Some of the accessories I've used in today's video, just thought I'd give you a quick show for those who are interested. Dive case, obviously, didn't use that too much due to the camera being 20 meters waterproof out the box. However, if I was using the underwater submarine, which can go 60 plus meters, I'd be using that. The mouth grip mount, this is really good for that, gives a real accurate point of view. Used it with the mountain biking and the paddleboarding and on the boat, really good. ND filters, I actually haven't tried these yet, but they're really good for, you just screw them onto the front of the camera and you can get that real good cinematic motion blur, basically sunglasses for your camera. The cage, this is actually the cage off the DJI Action 4, but it fits the 5 perfectly. I do have one for the 5 because I got the Adventure bundle. It's got the magnetic click at the bottom for vertical format and then super easy just to click it back around. The battery bank, as mentioned, stores 3 batteries and you can just charge via USB-C at the back. Floaty mount, I use this on the boat a couple of times because, as mentioned previously, I do lose action cameras quite often. Haven't used the surfboard stroke paddleboard suction mount yet, the sticky mount. Look forward to trying that. That is just a universal grip from somewhere else, but if you're wondering how you connect these magnetic click mounts, it's basically the same action camera stroke GoPro format. Just screw them on. And then the mic, which I'm recording the audio on right now. Well, there we go, guys. I've tested the DJI Action 5 Pro as much as I can in this 1 month pre-release window that I've had it for. I really like it. It's never crashed. It's never overheated. These sorts of cameras nowadays can be used for so much more than action. Making holiday videos with your family. One of the really cool things I like about these cameras is the 4K imagery. You can take a screenshot, which you can get some really, really cool photos for social media. I'll put a few on the screen now. Hope you've enjoyed this little intro first use experience video. I'm not an overly techie spec person. Everything's in auto, and that's kind of how I work. I'll see you all on the next adventure.